Hello and welcome to Brandy's Poetry Corner. I am reading poems at the moment from a book, so it's backwards, called Holyrood, a Garland of Modern Scots Poems, edited by W.H. Hamilton. I may have mentioned before the interesting word modern, which in this case means 1929. I realised that I should have known some of these poets better. So I've looked there will be the occasional note about the poets because, yes, as I said, I should have known them better. The first section of the book is called The Ways of Youth. And some of the poems do mention fairies and things. There will be one coming up. But this one is a very interesting view of fairies, I think. It's by J.B. Salmond, who was a journalist, poet, novelist. He was in the Black Watch in World War One and saw awful action out there. While in the war hospital, he edited Hydra, which is a house magazine that also featured Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon. But this is a later poem, I presume, and it's called Highland Fairies. There's a little note here. Highland Fairies, being some experiences of a child sent for the body's sake to a shooting lodge in the hills to the care of a stalker and his wife. The stalker's name is Donald because he's in the poem, and it's by J.B. Salmond. Highland Fairies by J.B. Salmond. I showed Donald the pictures in my picture book of fairies in the moonlight dancing around a tree. I told Donald I was fond of fairies, and Donald smiled so far away and took me on his knee. One morning, very early, while still the sun was yawning, Mary came and dressed me and gave me milk and bread, and I set out with Donald and the little baby mourning. We'll go and see the fairies now, was all that Donald said. So up the hill and up the hill I went on Donald's gurran. That's what he calls his pony. I call it Dapple Grey. Then Donald whispered, "Quiet now. We're very near the fairies." And creepy creep we clambered up and peeped among the bray. There were all the fairies in funny coats of brown and white, dancing, dancing, dancing on the grass where dewdrops shone. Flash, flash went their feet. The mothers all stood watching, and Donald clapped his hands, and weef! The fairies were all gone. These fairies' names are Louis. They come into the world in June and dance upon the hills among the heather wild. I used to want to be a fairy like they are in picture books, but now I'm all for Louis, the red deer child. I told Donald a story about fairies that flew on wings across the world, and Donald smiled and said, "I would be taking you to see the flying fairies if Mary mightn't be too sure that it was time for bed." So I kissed Mary and went away with Donald then, in the winter evening dark among the frost and snow, I on Donald's shoulder wrapped up in a tartan plaid that grew on Donald's father's sheep 100 years ago. And when we came at last away up on the mountain, where the stars were sharp as knives, Donald whispered, "There." And I saw the fairies with white wings of gossamer flying in the starlight through the shadow of the air. All white and silent went the flying hilltop fairies. From the snow into the mist their flitting dance began. I asked Donald, were they sprites or gnomes or elfin folk? And Donald told me that the fairy's name was Ptarmigan. The brown burns a gnome that was born in a cavern. The brown thrush, a kindly elf that loves to sing to me. And the wind among the grasses is a little goblin fellow that plays the strangest sort of games around the rowan tree. So I forgot my picture book with all its kinds of fairies, the fairy queens in party frocks with starch in every frill, and I find all my fairies now in my dear Donald's picture book, that very splendid picture book that Donald calls a hill. Thank you. I hope you like that. Yes, I meant to say before there's this word, which I know is pronounced Louis, which is a calf or a fawn, the red deer child, in this poem. For more poems read by me, look me up, Brandy Pearson, on YouTube. Thank you.